I'm going to call to order the Monday, November 14th, regular meeting of the West Lafayette Community School Corporation Board of Trustees. We'll start with approval of the agenda for tonight's meeting. Can I get a motion, please? A second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Schott. Any questions, comments, changes to the agenda tonight? Okay. Hearing none, can I get a vote, please? And let me pause there and say Dr. Springer is out of town. She is celebrating, I've been given permission to say, a brand new grandson. He is beautiful. So she is being a grandma in Pennsylvania, and we are enjoying her via Zoom tonight. So all of our votes will be roll call. Board members are all familiar with this already, but we'll go down the list. I understand that alphabetical would make more sense, but I need it to be a little simpler than that. So I will start with Mr. Karpik and work my way around for the roll call votes. So that said, in this first item to approve the agenda for the November 14th meeting, Mr. Karpik, what say you?
I say yay.
Okay, we got a yay.
Yay.
Mr. Marley? Aye. Mr. Schott? Aye. Dr. Springer?
Aye.
Aye. Mrs. Austin?
Aye.
Dr. Yin?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, that is unanimous, Mrs. Julian. We'll move on to approval of the minutes of the October 10th, 2022 regular meeting. Can I get a motion, please? Moved by Mr. Karpik.
Second.
Second by Mr. Marley. Any changes? Anyone notice anything on the minutes from our last meeting? Okay. Hearing none. Mr. Karpik? Aye. Mr. Marley?
Aye.
Mr. Schott? Aye. Dr. Springer?
Aye.
Mrs. Austin?
Aye.
Dr. Yin?
Aye.
Okay. That motion carries, Mrs. Julian. Unfinished business. We have none tonight. We're going to start with our recognition portion this evening, and the West Lafayette Elementary School Good Citizenship Club Life Skill of Honesty, and I assume, Mrs. Delaney, that you are presenting that.
Well, last month we were here, we got to introduce our first round of Good Citizenship Club members. So these are our next four. They are representing the life skill of honesty. So their teachers or other staff members got to nominate, actually any adult in the building could nominate a student because they showed such great life skills of honesty. So we have one representative from each grade level. I'm going to say their name, and then all you have to do is wave. I promise no speech today. Okay? Okay. All right, so down here we have Isla Salvo. Can you raise your hand and say hi? Or you can just wave now. So she is in Mrs. Beckefeld's kindergarten class. And then we have Titus May. Can you wave, Titus? And he is in Ms. Gould's first grade class. And then we have Sophia Cabral. And Sophia is in Mrs. Peters' second grade class. And then Duke Scott is in Mr. Brandon's fifth grade class. So these are just a small sampling of our honest students who we're so excited to get to share them with you. So thank you.
While they're all getting lined up for pictures, I will tell you also that we had a lovely donation of treats from Cumberland Point. That is a facility over on Cumberland Avenue. And they donated treats for all of our students being recognized tonight, and anybody else in our meeting who would like to help yourselves. I haven't tasted it, but it smells very good. You're welcome to help yourself to that. All right, we got to clap again. So we're going to move on with our recognitions this evening. I need to tell you that It is not unusual for the board president to receive emails about staff members, and there's always a little bit of a moment when you see it in your inbox where you go, oh, okay, and then you open it. I received one this time for one of our directors, and I am not going to elaborate upon it. Instead, I'm going to allow the voice of his employees to speak on his behalf. Hello. I drive school bus for West Lafayette School Corporation. My boss, Doug Caldwell, goes above and beyond to lead our group of drivers. I've driven for Doug for almost 4 years now and never cease to be amazed with the way he handles his heavy load of responsibilities, as well as maintaining a meaningful work relationship with each of his employees. Doug used to work for the Sheriff's Department. He retired years ago and went to work for Tippecanoe School Corporation. About 4 years ago, he took over the position of the Director of Transportation at West Lafayette School Corporation. Since going to work for Doug, I've watched him handle an overwhelming workload, from creating dozens of bus routes, managing drivers for each route, addressing the parents with concerns, the schools with schedules, the buses that need maintenance, student behavior, staff meetings, athletic trip requests, field trips, and the list goes on and on. He always goes out of his way to meet our needs as his employees and treats our family needs as a huge priority. On top of this, he coaches high school football. This summer, one of our drivers accepted a new job and resigned. Shortly after, he fell ill and spent some time in the hospital and has been home waiting on surgery ever since. Doug took time out of his personal schedule and went to our past coworker's home to check in on him and just be there for him. I've never worked for anyone that I respected so highly. This man deserves so much recognition, more than us drivers could ever express. We are wondering if there's a way to recognize him through the schools. Thank you. Samantha L. Borga and all of the West Lafayette bus drivers. Mr. Caldwell, I just want you to hear, I wanted you to hear that. I think it speaks as much to your amazing crew of drivers that you've built and you've nurtured and cared for as it does for you, and all of it's very high praise. I am very grateful, and I know the rest of the board is very grateful that our children go back and forth from school every day safely under your watch. Thank you. Thank you to all of you. All right. And I know we had some other recognitions to go through. Mrs. Cronk, are you starting tonight? All right.
Good news from around the district. So I'd like to speak a little bit more about the elementary school. So if you don't know, the Good News Club, what we featured this evening at the elementary, helps students see the benefits of good character and looks beyond academics alone. We're pleased to welcome this month's students. We also want to thank our parent council at the elementary for their continued sponsorship of grants for teachers that enrich and enhance the classroom experience for students and empowers teacher professional creativity. Finally, another thank you to the parent council for organizing the Poinsettia Sale fundraiser and to all who supported that fundraiser, including the local supplier.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Cronk. And Mrs. Roth.
So we have two of our principals here tonight, and we are -1. And that is because currently Willis is hosting the Spell Bowl. So Mrs. Saros is at the Spell Bowl this evening, but we also want to point out Willis has hosted some exciting things recently. They had the Veterans Day program, which I think was a huge success. Lots of students, lots of veterans, and the staff did a wonderful job with that. If you did not get the chance to see pictures on social media, I would encourage you to look for pictures somewhere because really it was impressive and the choir did a wonderful job. And then also at the end of October, we hosted the English Language Learner Evening to Give Thanks. And that was courtesy of our EL team and our food services team. The EL team, with Mrs. Benhart's leadership, went out of their way to collect donations to host an evening with the traditional Thanksgiving meal and lots of activities for families and students. So lots of exciting things going on at Willis as well.
And Dr. Greiner.
Exciting things at the high school, but we do want to point out we could never name them all because there's just great things going on throughout our district. But a few things I'll highlight are that the high school just hosted performances of A Wrinkle in Time, both Friday and Saturday. Amazing performances. Model United Nations was also hosted by our West Side. Harrison and Ben Davis attended. And then continued success to our athletic teams, including wins for our girls basketball team, and our football team have won regional and are headed to semi-state yet this coming weekend. They take on Bishop Chatard. Good luck to our Red Devils.
Anybody else have any other good news that we've missed here tonight that you'd like to add on to that? Okay. So we're going to move on now to item 4, communication from the audience. Agenda items, we do not have anyone signed up for that tonight. Moving on to item 3, new business, school board policy revision, first reading only. Dr. Greiner.
And they're first reading only because they are changes due to Indiana code. They're policies that we already have in place, and they're revisions to ensure that we're consistent with Indiana code. Policy 131.1, bylaws and procedures. Revisions clarify that when a vote to adopt, amend, repeal, or suspend a bylaw or policy, board members may be considered present for such a vote in any manner authorized by law. And you may recall that we adopted policy for such manners. And so this just states that they can vote to amend based on if they're present in a way that can be recognized as present. Policies 1521, 3121, 4121, and 8121 are all related to criminal history information, and they're similar regarding the revisions, but they're within respective sections. So they're on the common theme, but within each section, administration, professional staff, support staff, and operations. Policy 2464, programs for high ability students. Here there's simply been revisions to the language, and that's again related to Indiana code. The spirit of the requirements remains consistent. Policy 5610, suspension and expulsion of students. Revisions have been made to further ensure consistency with regard to Indiana code. Language updates, legal areas of disability, pronouns, etc. updates. Policy 6250 required ADM counts for the purpose of state funding and verification of residency for membership. Changes are related to February count day and seniors that are graduating early. Policy 6550, travel, payment, and reimbursement. This is just to be consistent with SBOA expectations that forms should be submitted for documentation. And then policy 8600, transportation. Revisions to this policy have been made to incorporate changes to the definition of appropriate vehicles and as created through legislation, which also expands purposes for special purpose vehicles. It's my recommendation that the board approve the revisions as provided in the board packet.
This is just the first reading only.
These are ones that are revisions only, and so they require this
Only the
first reading. Yes.
Okay, so sorry.
No problem.
Okay, I am interested in motion, please. Moved by Mr. Schott. Second by Mrs. Austin. Are there any questions on these policies? Comments, concerns? Okay, I am not hearing any. We'll do roll call vote. Mr. Karpik. Aye. Mr. Marley.
Aye.
Mr. Schott. Aye. Dr. Springer. Mrs. Austin, thank you. Dr. Yin, thank you. That motion carries. Moving on to item 4, new school board policy, first reading of 2.
Yes.
Dr. Greiner.
So this is a new policy, and as you said, Mrs. Witt, this one will require 2 readings, and so this is the first reading, so the board will not be asked to take action. It is policy 2432, grievance for violation of state law limiting participation of transgender girls in athletics. This is a new policy, and it's developed to comply with the new statute, Indiana Code 2033-13, and it's added by House Enrolled Act 1041. It prohibits the participation of transgender girls on athletic teams or sports that have been designated as being a female or woman's or women's or girls' athletic team or sport. It requires also the development of a grievance procedure to address complaints by parents or students regarding the violation of the law. Again, this is a first reading. This policy will be on the December board agenda.
Can I get a motion, please? Oh, I'm sorry, no motion, just a reading. Are there any questions for Dr. Greiner about this policy? Go ahead, you can say it, Amy.
I understand that we have to have the policy in order to comply with the law. So if we vote for the policy in order to remain in compliance with the law, can we do so in such a way that specifies if we don't agree with the law? Does that make sense?
You can do that, but what you're doing is exactly what you said. You are protecting the corporation by adopting policy that keeps us aligned to the law so that we are not in a litigious situation.
That's
I think that
Bummer.
policy has to protect the school corporation, and that is a battle that needs to be fought at the courthouse with the courthouse budget, not the school corporation budget. And that's just a function of where we are in the pecking order of things.
gotcha. Thank you.
That said, I think that if you wanted to make comment at the time of the meeting, that you would be welcome to do so.
Awesome. Thank you.
Okay. Anybody else, any comments or questions about this? Okay, moving on to item number 5, Fanning Howie 10-year capital improvement plan. Mr. Payne.
Back here for a second presentation of the capital improvements plan. I'm a project executive and architect with Fanning Howie, and I've led a team of architects and engineers in the development of the capital improvement plan to date. Just by way of review, before we jump into the detail, what is a capital improvement plan? The purpose is to identify facility remodeling, renovation, or new construction work that over a 10-year period would be advisable for these items, for replacement of components that in the future will reach their useful life. Examples would be carpet, which might typically have a life of between 10 to 12 years. Terrazzo, on the other hand, which we're all familiar with, very hard surface, has a useful life of probably greater than 50 years. So obviously maintenance and or replacement of those materials would vary in terms of when that would be required. Improvements that satisfy overall programming and the learning environment. You'll see in a moment that we toured the buildings with each of the administrative leaders as well as facility folks, and then we also had an in-depth discussion about all these items. So we're relying upon the educational experts in the buildings to advise us to spaces, areas of learning that maybe are not satisfying programming needs or supporting the educational programs that they are delivering. And then maintenance items that fall outside the capacity of facility staff or require the preparation of documents by a design professional. So the state is very specific about both dollar volume as well as the type of work that's required as to whether a licensed architect or engineer would need to provide or prepare documents for that, whether it would need to be bid or quoted versus whether Mr. Daly could simply secure services to say paint a wall, replace finishes, or do light maintenance work. And in fact, he is doing a very excellent job of that. And so that work generally is not included in the capital improvement plan. The purpose of the plan then is to identify costs associated with each item. Again, you'll see a spreadsheet tool that we've created to facilitate this process and also place in it projections in terms of inflationary impact, because of course not everything might be done in 2024, but what would actual cost projected to be 10 years out from now. Prioritize each item relative to need, remaining life, and available funding. That has in fact not taken place entirely yet. I know that the corporation has retained the services of Mr. Reuter to help advise on funding capacity. He has not had a chance to really evaluate this tool at this point and advise on when funding may be available and to what extent. Likewise, I think there are opinions from the educational leaders in terms of prioritization of items. This tool, I will say, is very flexible. Things can move forward if they become a priority, or they can move back if they are lesser priority. So we promised that we would deliver a spreadsheet tool that will allow you to continue to modify and adjust over time, and I'll show that here shortly. Our initial draft, we attempted to balance an annual spend over the 10-year period. Some of the things that were larger, we placed at the very end because we're not in a position to advise you or for you to make a decision on things such as the lower level of the junior senior high school, of which was not included in the major renovation project recently, but yet certainly from our perspective as well as from educational leaders might warrant some work there. And you'll also see that our initial projection starts in the year 2024. In a subsequent item here, you'll be addressing the need for replacement of mechanical equipment that will occur next year, next summer, at either the elementary school or at this campus at Happy Hollow. It's the way that things work now that you are planning typically a year in advance, designing and actually bidding and quoting work so that you have adequate time for logistics to take their place, to be able to procure materials in some cases can be 30 and 40 weeks out. So advising you on a plan where you would attempt to address 2023 work other than the work I just mentioned would not be advisable. So earliest year would be 2024. And that's not to say that you couldn't secure or procure work next year, but our 10-year plan starts at 2024. Just as a reminder, these were the educational leaders that toured with us in each one of the buildings and then also met with us afterwards as we walked through and talked through what we had heard and seen, and ultimately these items that we discussed have been incorporated into the spreadsheet tool at this point. Oops, sorry. Okay, so I guess I should say, because there's a lot of detail here and it's possibly difficult to read, but I will explain the format. Each one of the board members has this same presentation in front of them in hard copy so that they can actually read it with a little bit more clarity. The way that this tool works, each one of the buildings was organized by areas. So on the left-hand side, moving from top to bottom, you'll see major categories of building interior. So these would be actual learning and occupied spaces within the building. And within those areas, we've identified specific work items or improvements underneath building interiors, such as, pardon me, let me flip to my copy here. Sorry. Such as in the elementary school 300 wing, which received little or no remodeling work in the most recent development. It's in relatively good shape, but now that some of the newer classroom spaces or the remodeled classroom spaces are in place, clearly there are certain areas in terms of finishes, equipment, and so forth that would warrant replacement. The next category is site, and this would be everything from pavement surfaces, playgrounds. In the elementary school, you all know, interesting fact is that there are also high school, junior, senior high school athletic facilities on that campus. And so rather than separate those out, bring those into the spreadsheet on the junior, senior high school, we identified them at this campus. An example would be for the elementary school, ultimately a desire to move away from a mulch surface to a soft surface type of play surface that is in your playgrounds. An example of the athletics impact for junior, senior high school would be the need to replace sports lighting at the baseball diamond. So that's included under site. Pardon me. Building envelope is the next major category. This would include roofing needs. This would include exterior building wall improvements, possibly window improvements. In the case of the elementary school, the one area that was identified were some deteriorating exterior doors, not from a safety standpoint, but rusting, deterioration of hardware, things like that. And so that would be projected for replacement at some point. And then what I would call overall infrastructure, which is mechanical, electrical, plumbing, and technology components. So just as an example, this would be boilers, chillers, lighting, things like that. And so in a particular case in the elementary school, one of the major things that Mr. Daly pointed out was over time a desire to upgrade temperature control systems, some of them still being pneumatic systems, moving to more of a digital system, which can be more easily controlled, likewise programmed to create greater energy efficiency over time. So that would be a tip, pardon me, that would be an example. At the bottom, there's a summary of those costs, as well as factors for attendant soft costs that would be plugged in. So it does you no good to project simply costs if you don't know what a total project cost would be, which would include permits, contingencies, design fees, those types of things that would attend any type of capital improvement. And that would give a summary. So that would be the summary of all the costs, today's costs if you were to do them at this particular moment, which we're not suggesting, but here's why this tool is very flexible. So in the right hand, moving across in 10-year increments, we have shown these costs as we have discussed with educators, with Mr. Daly and others, and plugged in these areas over time. And each one of these columns introduces a projected inflationary factor. So obviously, if you were to do something in 2024, that would cost less than if you waited to do that 5-10 years from now. So that helps you to project out. The reason that this tool is flexible is you move forward as, and it's a very simple spreadsheet. I can operate this spreadsheet, so believe me, it's very simple. So if you were to accomplish work this year, but not everything that's in that first column, then you can easily adjust and move those items to the next year or a subsequent year. So it's always a moving, flexible tool to project out. And you can also add items. If other items came to the fore and were identified, that could be introduced into the spreadsheet. So it's not a proprietary Fanning Howey spreadsheet. This is simply an Excel spreadsheet that will certainly become the property of the school corporation, which you can use, pardon me, going forward. Now, this is just the elementary school. If we were to move then, pardon me, to the intermediate school, which is obviously a brand new building, you wouldn't be surprised to see that there's very little there in terms of any significant type of spend or expenditure that would be projected. One of the things that we noticed in particular on the intermediate school that was suggested was on the east side of the building. In the middle of that courtyard, the three-sided secure courtyard, that is done very nicely with playground area, hard surface area. It's very well used. Because of the school population, it was felt that it would be desirable on the east side, if possible, to introduce additional play area, which might be more intermediate grades or so forth, or higher grades. And so we have plugged in a number in 2026, which would represent an investment there to provide additional soft and hard surface and fencing and so forth to secure that area on the east side to provide more outdoor play area for students. That was probably really the only significant thing there. Otherwise, other projected items, some flooring out at 2031, but again, very modest expenditures in a brand new building, which looks great. And by the way, I want to say all of your buildings are being very well maintained. You certainly can be very proud of what your maintenance and facility staff are doing in terms of the buildings. We didn't see anything that was obviously not being addressed on a day-to-day basis. So not surprisingly, at the junior senior high school, there are quite a few more items. That's not surprising because it's your largest building, it's your flagship building. There's just a lot more spaces, functions, activities going on. And so not surprising, a number of things were identified there. Early on, some groups of student restroom, group restrooms, areas such as finishes, fixture replacement, toilet partition replacement, things like that, found their way into that first category. By the way, because of the number of items here and the size of the building, this is on 2 pages, so I'll just go over to the right-hand side, then I'll move to the infrastructure. At site, there were a number of things. Right now, the site's being well utilized. There would be a desire long-term, possibly to working with the city of West Lafayette, rethink where a spectator seating is, improvement of lighting, some grading improvements, track surface improvements. This is for the athletic facility that's on the junior senior high school campus, not the athletic campus, which we'll talk about in just a moment. Those are all desirable things. We had pushed those out to the far end, but some of those may find their way, migrate back into earlier years as additional study is made on available funding. I would point out one of the areas that we spend a fair amount of time in, and I mentioned this earlier, is the lower level, locker rooms, weight training, strength training, showers, training areas, heavily used both by student athletes as well as community patrons. That area did not receive the level of renovation remodeling like the other floors of the building did, which looked just great and spectacular. Going forward, that was certainly shown as an area that would be, that could use to be addressed both in terms of the way in which we address moving away from group showers into individual shower compartments. We just don't do group showers anymore. That's not appropriate really for students of any age, from elementary school obviously to high school age. So that would be something that would be improved. Locker areas, the way in which they're separated and addressed. You were talking about a policy, gender neutral restrooms, things of that nature. And so that is potentially a significant spend at the lower level, but when that would be considered, would have to be evaluated relative to available funding mechanisms. Building envelope, you'll notice there are 3 roof areas that Mr. Daly identified, and we show those staggered to help balance the spend between 2027 and 2029. Again, going forward, if those need to migrate forward and other things need to migrate backwards, that certainly can be accomplished, and the spreadsheet will allow you to do that. Pardon me. Under mechanical, electrical, and plumbing, again, because of the size and the age of the building, there are a number of things that going forward ultimately Mr. Daly would like to see upgraded. One is temperature control systems throughout the building. Now that can be done incrementally or as a whole. We show that in 2025, and that's a significant spend. The other thing is air handling units, and President Witt asked me to give a little bit more definition to that. We'll be talking about that later in a bid consideration as well. So think of air handler units as your gigantic fans that are moving air to and from all of your occupied spaces. These air handlers also include coils, both for heating and cooling. Air handlers typically have between a 25 to 30-year lifespan. They simply lose their efficiency, replacement parts are not available. And so in the case of the junior, senior high school, we have several of those units that are candidates coming up in a couple of years for replacement. Likewise, there's some things, we call them terminal boxes. So there are also supplemental units that are within classrooms that then distribute that air that's coming from the major air handlers. Those are also seeing their useful life. We're projecting replacement out in 2027 at this point. And then a number of other items, relatively detailed, but all things from an infrastructure standpoint. These are not things that were addressed in this recent major renovation. These are things that at that point in time were not seen as a priority, but now you should be considering those. Every school corporation, I would say, of your size that is effectively maintaining their facilities has a plan like this. This gives you a roadmap to plan for these things, and then as funding becomes available, you can prioritize and address these things before they become emergencies. So that's the purpose of this overall plan. Please. Yes.
The temperature control change, that's not, is that to allow there to be more control in classrooms for temperature? What's the change?
Right. So with the exception of like a brand new building like the intermediate school, that's all a brand new digital control digitally controlled temperature control system that's accessed via a web-based system where Mr. Daly or whomever could see every room temperature and could do a night setback to reduce energy use and so forth. In the case of the junior senior high school, not surprising, over a period of time, you end up with pieces that are older, some that are newer. For instance, in some of the newest work that you've done, I'm sure that those temperature control areas, those components were replaced. And they're all being knitted together to some degree of effectiveness. At some point, it would be advisable to provide an overall new system that would task both the newest components, but then replace the oldest components so that it would be more homogeneous and easier to control and likewise provide greater energy efficiency. Okay, so the athletics complex, again, it looks great. There are a number of things you're not surprised to see that we don't have a whole lot in terms of building construction, although there were definitely needs that were identified within the concessions, locker room, support building, which can be timely in terms of renovation. I know that there are some tight constraints for patrons moving around a concession area, and so there was discussion about being able to expand the concession service to the east side and thereby improve spectator circulation in that area. Also access to visitor side bleachers and so forth. In this particular site, we have not established any particular priorities on any of the components. Rather, we've just shown a summary. Oops, sorry, I'm looking. Yeah, I apologize. I was ahead of myself. Back to the athletics complex. So we have shown a number of things there in a totals column. The things that are really going to be in discussion going forward, I think one of the major topics might be the consideration of synthetic turf. I would say that, believe it or not, 20 plus years ago, the first synthetic turf was put down in Center Grove High School. Believe it or not, they are on their third iteration of turf. But what that enables you to do is use that for marching band, for soccer, for football. Basically, any activity is not precluded from using that surface. Right now, you limit your use primarily because of the football season. A natural turf, it can get destroyed because of water, moisture, and so forth. So it's not as used as much as synthetic turf. So I'm not here to promote that. I'm just giving you a sort of an overview of why synthetic turf is becoming much more common. Undoubtedly, probably your team visits other schools and probably plays on turf and sees it. So something to consider. We're not suggesting it's absolutely necessary, but it's certainly something that other school corporations are considering. Yes, sir. This would be for one field. For the football field. We had a discussion about if you were to do this on the actual junior senior high school campus in terms of PE use and other activities, would certainly make sense. But then in terms of your primary athletic complex, it seems to make more sense. I think there was a little bit of a general feeling that was probably the place where you would consider that, and that may need some more conversation. All right, Happy Hollow. So stepping back, I know that there was a study before, and so we looked at this building along with Mr. Daly and others, and not just rolled over, but we came to the same conclusion that, for instance, this space, the newest spaces to the east, which were the newest addition to this facility, which include the kitchen, food service, some of the classroom spaces, the gym obviously is heavily utilized. Those primary spaces seem to be the ones that are greatest candidates for retaining. On the other hand, the classroom spaces, both in terms of infrastructure, size, flexibility, technology, and so forth, and the exterior window wall, which is not very energy efficient, would demand a significant expense to upgrade those to current standards. And it does not appear at this point in time that you have a demand for that space. So we're suggesting that conceptually, the highest and best use for this building would be to retain those spaces that I talked about: gym, meeting room, food service, kitchen, those areas that are currently most heavily utilized, maintain those, demolish the two-story portion, which incorporates that aging infrastructure, window wall, exterior window wall that's not energy efficient, and then come back, reface the balance of the building, utilize in a brief or an addition to the building which would satisfy the needs for administrative offices. It would make sense to have administrative offices immediately adjacent to your public meeting room here, and then consider also the possibility of a pre-K site at this location. What that'll do is that'll free up some site area for additional parking, circulation, and green space. So that was one thing that's incorporated in here in Happy Hollow that we've suggested as a study item or as a consideration. You were just congratulating your transportation folks, and you know that that's growing, and now you are handling your own service. It's your own fleet. And so at this point in time, with 10 to 12 buses, the need for servicing your own buses, a transportation center would make sense. In fact, you park many of your buses here. Well, if this building would satisfy the needs for administration and preschool and free up this parking lot area, and also the fact that these tennis courts here to the north and west are underutilized, might this be the location for that transportation center? When I say that, 2 service bays would be a modest, would be a good serviceable size for your bus fleet, and then park and store all your buses at this site. This does not preclude the continued use of the aquatic center here. That would not impact that. And then also we know that marching band uses these tennis courts over here to the east, so we have some modest funds plugged in here to resurface and continue to use those for marching band practice. So conceptually, that seemed to be a good thought as to how this campus, this site could continue to provide good use for the school corporation. And those costs are shown. We've not projected those out into any year because I think it would be too early at this point, as conceptual as this is, to suggest any particular year. And not all of these things obviously would need to be done at the same time. You certainly could do the transportation center and not Happy Hollow, or you could address this building and not a transportation center, or do it all at one time if you chose to do so. Yes.
I have one point I just want to make sure is clear. You've given us a 10-year plan, but it's really just a look. Everything on here, there's nothing here. We're not voting to approve to do any of these things. Can you clarify that a little bit?
Right. So again, the way we went about this was our architects and engineers interfaced with your educational leaders, your administrative leaders at each one of the school sites, at each one of the campuses, and asked them to identify the things that were not allowing them to do their best possible job in terms of delivering educational programming. And so that was a pretty fine filter because, again, you've just gone through a major project and addressed many of those things already. So with that fine filter in mind, again, we identified those infrastructure things, some of those modest remodeling things, with the exception of the lower level of the junior, senior high school. And these are all things that you would like to do. Some of the infrastructure things, ultimately, you'll probably need to do those. When you'll need to do those, it's probably better to plan to do those with available funding rather than wait until they become an emergency. But again, this is not, you have to do these tomorrow, but rather the whole purpose was to create a flexible spreadsheet tool that you can continue to modify and move to decide when and if you choose to make these expenditures.
Dr. Yin?
Several. So the first, this column are the current cost.
Yes.
Then these are the projected one with the inflation
Yes.
considered.
Yes.
Okay. And the projected year will be our guess, right? So as for like when exactly they need to be replaced is kind of unknown because sometimes,
Okay, so Right. Theoretically, just about any piece of equipment you could continue to Band-Aid and make adjustments and maybe go on eBay and find replacement parts for a unit that's no longer manufactured. That's entirely possible. So in the case, I would say, of the infrastructure improvements, and in most cases, we interface with Mr. Daly. He's very familiar with your buildings. Day to day, he knows the things that he's having to repair or to keep in motion. And so a lot of those infrastructure items we did project out in particular years. Some of the remodeling things, such as painting, ceiling replacements, things like that, that's certainly up to your choice in terms of when you prioritize or do those things.
Yeah, one scenario I can imagine will be, let's say, AC is broken, then we can check this sheet to see whether actually it's due to be replaced. If it is, then that means most likely we should just replace it rather than Band-Aid, right? So something like that.
Right.
And another question is, I wonder how the cost is determined, given, sometimes different suppliers may have different numbers for those costs, and then in general, how are they determined?
Okay, so we've used our own internal budgeting tools. Our primary practice is 85% K-12 design throughout India, well, quite frankly, throughout the Midwest and the country. But our office in Indianapolis is primarily focused on Indiana work. So these are based on our cost history of what we understand this type of work would cost. And then we've inflated it at an average of 3% per year out 10 years. I would suggest that as we watch and I realize right now it's somewhat just short of 8%. So our current costs are reflective of that. As inflationary pressure changes, and it is because it's always been cyclical, then you can modify the spreadsheet tool to drop or raise the inflationary impact over time as well. But yes, these are costs that we're experiencing today for projects that we're doing throughout Indiana. So and honestly, we're pretty conservative about those two at this point.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Dr. Springer, did you have a question?
No.
Okay. Anyone else? Okay. Thank you, Mr.
Thank
Payne.
you.
Moving on to item 6, the West Lafayette Elementary School air handler bid, and Mrs. Kronk.
Perfect timing, just after his presentation. So bids were recently opened on October 12th for the replacement of the chiller at Happy Hollow and the air handlers at West Lafayette Elementary. Advertisements for the bid opening were published on September 28th and October 5th. Mr. Payne of Fanning Howey assisted with this process. Of the 3 bids submitted, D.A. Dodd of Rolling Prairie, Indiana submitted the lowest bid. With that being said, the bids were much higher than expected. After discussing the results of the bid with Mr. Payne, it was decided that the chiller replacement at Happy Hollow would be postponed due to the high cost as well as the uncertainty of the future of the building. A negative change order with D.A. Dodd was pursued in accordance with state purchasing guidelines, and we're recommending the acceptance of the bid for the replacement of the air handlers at West Lafayette Elementary School at the cost of $381,300, which is option 2 on the architect recommendation included in your board packets.
Thank you. All right, can I get a motion? Let's start there.
Moved.
Moved by Mr. Karpik. Second by Mr. Schott. Do we have any questions? I know we got that bid late. Hopefully everybody had a chance to take a look at it. There were delays by no fault of anyone here. Any
Yeah,
questions?
I just would like to thank you for postpone the Happy Hollow one, because like what we discussed last time, it makes more sense to do it later after a big decision on this building. Another thing is in the document, there's the word saying negative change order. What does that mean?
A change order, so you can do change orders, you can do an additional change order, which means you can add to a project, so that would increase the project cost, or you can do a deduct change order, which when we did that bid, it was 2 separate projects. So the deduct change order took off the Happy Hollow section.
Thanks.
Okay.
Any other questions? We'll proceed with the vote. Mr. Karpik?
Aye.
Aye. Mr. Marley?
Aye.
Mr. Shaw?
Aye.
Dr. Springer?
Aye.
Mrs. Austin?
Aye.
Dr. Yin?
Aye.
That's, motion carries. Moving on to item 7, employee insurance renewal update, and Mrs. Kronk.
The board approved an increase not to exceed 9% to the West Lafayette Schools health insurance premiums for the 2023 benefit year at its October 13th, 2022 meeting. After working with Brown & Brown, our insurance consultant, we finally arrived at a 6% increase to rates. Please remember that employees are paying 6% more on what they are currently paying and not the actual full premium increase, as that increase is shared with the corporation. And this is just an informational update, and board action is not needed at this time.
Thank you for the update. Any questions for Mrs. Kronk about this item? All right, we'll move on to item number 8, Synovia Solutions. That is transportation GPS. And back to you, Mrs.
Yeah.
Kronk.
The West Lafayette School Corporation Transportation Department has been using Synovia Solutions to provide GPS locator services for school buses for several years now. Our equipment has traditionally used the Verizon 3G network, which, if you've heard, they're shutting down that network as of December 31st. Due to this, it will be necessary to upgrade our equipment to the 4G network devices in order to continue this service. We currently have 2 agreements that will be combined into one new contract beginning on January 1 with this new agreement. The cost after the upgrade will amount to $7,128 annually, and the cost of additional units, if we ever needed to add any, would be $396 annually. The term of the agreement is for 36 months with automatic renewals for 2 years thereafter unless terminated, and the proposed contract is included in your board packets.
Thank you. Let's start with the motion. Moved by Mrs. Alston.
Second.
Second by Mr. Marley. We did have a question during board review, just to be clear. And Mr. Caldwell, since we have the benefit of you being here today, would you explain to us why we have GPS on our buses, but we do not have access to parents to that GPS? Correct.
If you look at, let's talk it geographically, we're very common. You'll get a 25-second update on your GPS. We have multiple stops that are within 650 feet. So if we were coming up the road, stop at DeHart, Conway, and right here at Kingston and Riverton, we're going to get these stops right here. Currently getting the GPS up. You can go out up to 2 miles. We only ask our students to be out 5 minutes earlier. And I know prior, when City Bus had this, the junior, senior high school, they had where you could follow the bus. We run our routes much more efficiently at that level than what City Bus had. There's a cost, as there is with anything. And I think we are efficient enough, we can afford the cost.
That's great. Thank you. Any other questions about that topic? Dr. Yin?
If we can explain the function of this GPS, like why, like what explain
Why do
in
we
the,
have it?
yeah, explain in the letter to
Right,
me, that'd be great. Thanks.
Sure. There's a lot of diagnostic information. So 3:17 a.m. every day, the computer wakes up, does a diagnostic. There's a low battery on one of the buses, then I get an email, that says, hey, we can find the bus. And also, not having a service center or a bus barn, as we call it. I have buses in multiple locations. And even one in 15 schools. So I don't start my route, I don't have to pull out till 7:08. I pick up kids in Lafayette and bring them back to Lafayette. So I can monitor the pre-trip and start up all of our buses, so I can make sure, because I'm not physically being able to see those buses because we're spread out over the city. So I can monitor them on my computer, also web-based on my phone. Any trips that are after school hours, I can look on my phone and see where that bus is at. We were just in Knox. Not only do we have 2 football buses, we have a band bus and a band bus. So after that game was over, I had to drive separately because I came back to team. I'm still monitoring our buses as we're making that track to make sure everything's going. The Synovia Solutions is a local Indianapolis company. That's also what TSC uses. And as you know, we contract all of our vehicle maintenance through TSC. So when you have live equipment, if we had a different company that provided that service, I might be waiting weeks on a new LMU for the brains to that computer, and then a technician comes down where being based just with TSC's equipment and live equipment goes with our buses, I can take it over there and have that bus back that service.
Thank you very much. So when parents receive the notice, like orange bus is 20 minutes late or 10 minutes late, something like that, it's due to, yeah, I know. So I just, for example, when it, so that kind of information actually due to that GPS system we have.
Well, that comes from
Mhm. Yeah, I know. But,
I'm notified if something stuff,
mhm.
that if we're gonna be more than 10 minutes, then I notify the school. I'm somewhere else. Logistically, if I'm to sit out in location, it's gonna be 10, 15 minutes late.
Yeah, thanks.
Any other questions? Okay, let's go ahead with a vote. Mr. Karpik,
Aye.
Mr. Marley,
Aye.
Mr. Schott,
Aye.
Dr. Springer,
Aye.
Mrs. Austin.
Aye.
Dr. Yin.
Aye.
Thank you. That motion carries. We will move on to item number 9, West Lafayette Community School Corporation employee. These are non-teacher wage increase. Mrs. Kronk.
The West Lafayette Community School Corporation staff works tirelessly to provide students with a safe and rigorous educational environment, paving the way for the district to be named one of the top school corporations in the state. The prospect of receiving increased tuition support from the state, as well as an increase in transfer tuition, has placed the district in a position to provide compensation increases for those employees, basically to all staff this year. After calculating the teacher raises coupled with the increase in revenue for the 22-23 school year, we're happy to recommend a 5% increase for both administrative and classified staff for the current school year, as well as a 5% increase for all lay coach positions. The approximate annual cost of these raises is $275,000. And the business office will continue to review both classified and substitute pay rates across the district, as I do know that that is a concern.
Thank you. All right, can we start with a motion, please?
So moved.
Mr. Marley, and a second? Second from Mrs. Austin. Questions for Mrs. Kronk? Okay, hearing none, let's go ahead with the vote. Mr. Karpik?
Aye.
Mr. Marley?
Aye.
Mr. Schott? Dr. Springer?
Aye.
Mrs. Austin?
Aye.
Dr. Yin?
Aye.
That motion carries. We'll move on to item 10, amendment to the West Lafayette Education Foundation bylaws. So the West Lafayette Schools Education Foundation is currently, according to President Mr. Doug Masson, engaged in an effort to clean up its bylaws. The last amendment to those bylaws was about 10 years ago. They are working on one section 5.06, which requires the school board approval to amend. So in that section as written, the treasurer of the school is required to serve as the assistant treasurer of the foundation, hold its money, sign its checks, all as directed by the foundation's directors. So it's just kind of a crossover. We don't believe that it has ever been done this way. Or the guess is that it was put in place when the foundation was just getting started and did not have a financial infrastructure to speak of. The foundation is requesting to amend their bylaws, which we have to approve again, to reflect the actual practice. So that document was provided by Mr. Masson, and we are here tonight just to basically vote to change so that the foundation can change its policy and in line with what it actually does and not what it says on the paper that they do. I would like to start with a motion, and then Mr. Masson has joined us tonight if anyone has any questions. So can I get a motion, please?
So moved. Second.
Moved by Mr. Karpik, second by Mr. Schott. Any questions this evening? Dr.
Not
Yin?
necessary for this particular bylaw. You explained it to me already, my question. Just a general question. So what's the relationship between the foundation and the school corporation? So it's an independent organization, or how is it related to alumni association or things like that? I wonder.
Mr. Masson, do you want to approach that question, or do you want me to? Dr. Yin is inquiring about the relationship between the schools and the foundation, essentially.
Yeah, so the foundation is an independent corporate entity, so it's its own thing. It's a nonprofit organization that's dedicated to supporting the mission of the school. So to that end, we have two school board members who are members of our board of directors. But otherwise, it's members of the community, former teachers, and that sort of thing. So they're separate, but we're entirely devoted to the West Lafayette School. And just on the financial thing, I think maybe I've written, we didn't know that if it had ever been done where the treasurer of the school was the assistant treasurer of the foundation. I probably overstated that. Just nobody currently involved with the foundation can remember when that was done. We handle their own finances for 10, 15 years.
Right.
Okay.
I could speak probably in the first year or two where that was more of a oversight or relationship, but it really hasn't been in practice since.
We're family members. We like each other.
Yeah,
That's
here's
the gist.
So let's say if a donor, an alumni, whoever wants to donate money to our corporation, should they donate it to us or donate to foundation, or then?
So usually those are steered to the foundation, but some people prefer to donate directly to the school corporation. And really it's, if donors want to contribute to the benefit of students, they have options for how they do that. Is that a safe way to explain that?
Yeah. There's things that the school can do that the foundation can't, things the foundation can do, the school can. For example, I'm not sure if you can invest money in Merrill Lynch or whatever to try to make a profit. And so we'll get people who endow a scholarship, and that gets invested, in various investment funds that we have a committee, and I don't handle it, so I'm going to give you a very superficial view of it. But that'll spin off money every year that we can use for foundation or use for a scholarship that the donor has. I'm not sure if the school is able to do that. That's correct. That's one reason that maybe somebody wants to donate to the foundation instead of the school.
The foundation actually has an investment policy that governs what they can invest the money into. And they also have a tax advantage benefit. So if you want to contribute dollars and receive a tax advantage as a contribution, foundation can do that for you. Sure.
Then how do you decide how to spend the money? Let's say we need money to do this. And then we, the teachers need grants and, scholarship. There are many ways to spend money.
Right.
How do you allocate the money?
It's going to be how the donor wants it. So if the donor comes in and says, I just want to spend on X, then we'll honor the donor's wishes. Then the school will say, hey, we have this particular need, and then we'll go and try and raise money for that particular need. Somebody just gives us money and says, hey, do something good for the school. We might touch base with the school and see, what the current need is, but the board of directors of the foundation would determine if there's no other direction as to where the money should be spent. We'd make that decision, but normally we ask the school because that's what we're there for, is to help the school out.
Can you explain the backpack program, teacher grants, and
You're giving a report tonight, Doug.
Yeah, so, we have the backpack program, which people will donate directly to. That's for food insecurity. They drop food off at people's houses who are in need. And sometimes people donate money directly to that. Sometimes we'll get grant money. We go out and get grants for the backpack program. So that's how that's directed. What the other one you suggest?
teacher grants?
Oh, teacher grants. So sometimes people donate directly to that. Sometimes it's just generally from the boards or from the foundation's general fund money. I think we have $8,000 budgeted for that. And there's a grant committee. I just got word that they notified 3 teachers, and I'm not prepared to speak what the grants were today. I think about 4,000 of that for the year, so.
But Yeah, also yeah.
A good example, the building projects raised over $2 million towards our last.
Yeah, so that was a special one,
And that was by decree by the school board and in conjunction with the foundation.
Mhm.
Thank you. I appreciate all the information. I wonder in the future uh, whether we can have kind of a yearly sharing of, the donations and how we spend the money. And so it can be more encouraging for donors to donate more and for people who have needs to know, how to apply for the grants to.
So,
Yeah,
so
seems
Doug,
like
Doug, the board president has historically come at least one time a year and given a report. And so they do come to a board meeting once a year. We're kind of catching Doug off guard tonight because he's not prepared a report, but yet has given at least half of one. But we also have, that's why we have 2 representatives from the board who go to the regular meetings and give us kind of updates on what's going on and process. But I know, Doug, typically, I know with COVID, you did not come to our meetings, but I can't remember the last time you've been.
Yeah, it might have been 2019.
Yeah, might have been a while, but that is traditionally what had happened is the president would come once a year. It is helpful.
Great. Yeah, because I noticed there are a lot of great donation opportunities, but many people don't know the information. So it would be nice to have more, publicize it more.
I think it's pretty well publicized.
Wendy's been doing it. We got
Wendy has done a fabulous job.
She's not really new anymore, I guess, year and a half, but Wendy Ayler has come in and done a pretty good job. So they send out the devil's advocate. There's a lot of alumni connection. They run tours. We do a pretty good job of keeping in touch with them because they're the ones who are most likely to donate. We haven't been as good, one of the things we want to do is be a bridge to the community. I'm not sure we've gotten as much word out to the community in the non-alumni section as we want. So that's definitely something we want to do. So that's, I think, along the lines of part of what you're thinking. I had another thought, but yeah, I'm kind of
Yeah. Yeah,
Thank you.
we put you on the spot and you've handled it well. Thank you. If there are no more questions, let's go ahead and move forward with a vote on this amendment to the bylaws. Can I start with you, Mr. Carpenter?
Aye.
Aye. Mr. Marley?
Aye.
Mr. Schott?
Aye.
Dr. Springer?
Aye.
Mrs. Alston? Aye. Dr. Yin?
Aye.
That motion carries. We'll move on to item 11, the personnel report. Dr. Greiner, you've been very quiet tonight, sir.
Recently I have, haven't I? So it's my recommendation that the board move to approve the personnel report as presented in the board packet.
Thank you. Can I get a motion, please?
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Marley, second by Mr. Schott. Any questions? There's your comment. Okay. Mr. Carpick.
Aye.
Mr. Marley.
Aye.
Mr. Schott.
Aye.
Dr. Springer.
Aye.
Mrs. Alston.
Aye.
Dr. Yin.
Aye.
And that motion carries. The personnel report is passed. We'll move on to Mrs. Cronk and accounts payable. Mrs. Cronk, I know we're a little bit off script here, but would you mind sharing with everyone what the change will be in your reporting after this month?
Oh, after this month, I do intend to bring a few new documents to the mix and do more like a financial update. I plan on bringing a fund report as of the end of the prior month, so you can see cash balances in different funds. And of course, I can explain what some of those mean, like the difference between federal grants and things like that. I may change the accounts payable voucher. I may use a different kind of a claims docket that comes directly out of the system instead. I'll probably report on gross payroll, which is a little bit more of a valid number to report on because that includes a lot of deductions and benefits and such. And then basically I'll share some updates like what the business office has done for that previous month. For instance, like right now we are calculating the retro pay for teachers because the master teacher contract, things like that.
Right.
Okay.
Thank you for
Great.
that. All right, sorry to get you off track there.
It's okay.
Accounts payable.
All right. So total claims for the past period are $2,842,654.86, including net payroll of $1,064,947.26. And the accounts payable voucher is included in your board packets for your information.
So we can start with a motion, please. Moved by Mrs. Austin,
Second.
second by Mr. Marley. Any questions for Mrs. Frank on any of the payables tonight? Dr.
Just, yeah, I'm so glad to see our legal service fees much lower than before. And another suggestion I would like to make is, I wonder whether we can routinely include the key
Oh, a
for
key.
the
A key?
key for the abbreviations
Okay.
in the packet. And I remember before,
You're referring to the one Mr.
Right.
Moldau put together?
right, exactly. So like if we can
I'll just see what
routinely,
that looks like.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it may change when you do the other changes,
Okay.
but
yeah, yeah, if we can routinely include that in the package, then so,
Information right now, still trying to find my way around the office, so I will look for that though.
We can communicate that and get that.
yeah, that'll be very
Okay.
helpful because for people who are not familiar with this, and it'll be very helpful to
Especially if I
see.
do the fund report and explain what the different fund numbers mean and things like that.
Right, and also, right now we share that information, the whole packet, and after the meeting, so for the community to take a look, if anyone is interested,
I'll work
they
on that.
can figure it out.
All right.
Okay, thanks.
you've done a remarkable amount of work in a short period of time, so thank you for that. Let's go ahead with the vote, please. Mr. Karpik?
Aye.
Mr. Marley?
Aye.
Mr. Schott?
Aye.
Dr. Springer?
Aye.
Mrs. Austin?
Aye.
Dr. Yin?
Aye.
And that motion carries. All right, we're going to move ahead. I've got a little bit of information to the board. Do you want to go first? Do you want me to go first?
I would be happy to go first,
Dr.
just a
Greiner will
few
go
things. Yes. So the new board members' individual meetings with me will occur in the very near future. I've set up a meeting with both board members that'll start in January. One of those will be on November 21st and one of them on November 29th. So I'm looking forward to an introductory meeting and beginning to develop a relationship so that we can move forward with school business together. The new board members onboarding will occur in December, and we'll find a common date with the two new board members, Mrs. Witt, Mrs. Roth, Mrs. Cronk, and me. And we are in the process, our two board members, Dr. Springer and Mrs. Austin, are in the process of developing those binders that we discussed we would develop. And then we'll have our new board members in and we'll work through that process with them so they can comfortably start in January. And then district priorities, the community staff survey, you saw the results, kind of a summary in the Friday notes. And we want to discuss those results with our administrators. And then we'll present, Mrs. Roth will plan to present that, I believe, next board meeting, some highlights of that. And that's my report.
Thank you. Just as a reminder, the ISBA members, or ISBA fall conference happened October 3rd and 4th. Mrs. Austin, Dr. Springer, myself, and Dr. Yin attended with Dr. Greiner. We have made it our practice for several years to return and write reports about those development items, both to share those for the benefit of members who are not able to attend, as well as a measure of transparency for our community regarding funds spent for school board member professional development. That, as I said, was the beginning of October. I've submitted this evening to Mrs. Julian reports from Dr. Springer, Mrs. Austin, and myself. We'll look for yours, Dr. Yin, at
How to share it? So should we send?
you can just send it to me.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah, we'll send it and then we'll get that added as well. Those will be available as part of the documents. We've already benefited from that, as we all know, in developing these new board member packet binders that we're working on. So it's great to have that training and be able to apply it. Also, as an update, Dr. Greiner's annual performance evaluation proceeded as expected and is now coming to a close. Board officers are scheduled to meet with Dr. Greiner to review the evaluation on Wednesday, the 16th, 2 days from now. This is a key responsibility of the Board of Trustees, and I'm very grateful, I want to say that now, for all of you working together on this to come up with a great evaluation. And then finally, as Dr. Greiner mentioned, board goal number 3 for this year was to review new member training, continuing education, and board self-evaluation for members, and to formalize a plan to ensure consistency and focus on continual improvement. Members Springer and Austin took the lead on that particular task. And also thanks to Dr. Greiner and Mrs. Roth and Mrs. Kronk for all meeting and kind of hashing it out on your side of things as well. That binder information will be available to the new members after we meet with them in December. It will also be available to all of the current members who are not leaving the board, so that we all are working from the same updated information. Mrs. Julian will connect with you on that. It is available both electronically or paper, so you have time now to think about if you would like to kill a tree or if you would like to look at it in little tiny print on your computer screen. It's really going to be up to you to choose what you would like. Finally, members participated in the ISBA Fall Regional Meeting on November the 1st. We got some good insight and information from that as well. And then finally, I would like to, they both obviously, they're not obliged to do so, but thank you to Mr. Wong and to Mrs. Mumford for coming here to our meeting tonight and taking advantage of opportunities to initiate the onboarding early. All right, that was a lot. I'd also like committee reports. Mr. Karpik.
Foundation Committee, which Tom Schott and I both attended the meeting last week, which was November the 10th. The main issues, we had the treasurer's report, we talked about some of our challenges just because of the way that the market has gone of late, but has caused some a slight downturn in our overall balance, but that's not surprising at this point. And there are, as Mr. Marley said, a number of policies in place of how that money is invested. Development, and again, Wendy Ayler really has done a great job as the executive director. She's provided input on the development and events, one being the Scarlet and Gray Dinner, which will be the weekend of April 23rd, 2023. I believe still set to be in the Shively Center, the football Ross-Ade Stadium facility. Alumni and Wall of Pride also has been set in terms of the group we will be starting work on the next class, which would be the class of 2024. I think that will happen and start that process of nominations, which will happen in December, I believe, is when that begins. And Doug gave a lot on the executive side here today. And nominating bylaws also, we're looking at the possibility. I think right now we have 12 members. I believe that is correct. And I think we have, per the bylaws, the max size is 22. We're not looking to add 10, but I think there are 2 or 3 people that are in the process of being nominated. That's the report.
Mr. Marley?
Yes. All right. So you saw the culmination of the insurance committee sessions that we had. We were quite pleased with the renewal, actually, because it was well below medical inflation rates. So even though we had some claims, we really were able to offset that with Brown & Brown's consultation. Also, we're hopeful that our clinic's going to help us keep our premiums in check. So stay tuned on that, but we agree that's been a good move so far. Negotiations is over with. We saw our classified staff again received an increase today, so I'm very happy to see the increases across the board because these are our most valuable assets in our corporation. Redevelopment Commission. So the 2023 budget final draft was approved at last meeting. For those of you that don't know, we actually have 5 TIF districts that is a benefit to our community. Through those 5 TIF districts, the increment we collect on an annual basis is equal to $22,850,000. We use that to pay for things like fire trucks, police cars, radios, technology, anything that's capital related can be paid for. The most significant expenditures that we're going to see in 2023 is Cason Park. We're going to get a new park off of Cumberland Avenue. The cost of that is $8,850,000. It's going to be a very nice park. Also, a lot of road improvements planned. Cherry Lane and Lindbergh Road for a total of $4,350,000. Those are just highlights. One of the things that I would like to highlight is that we paid for surveying equipment. The reason we bought the surveying equipment is to act as a system of checks and balances so that when we do a street improvement project, we actually know that it's in the proper position. So we do streets once instead of twice. So that's a good move, and that's my report.
Thank you very much. Mr. Schott.
Tough to top that. Only I'll add to Foundation report, as Doug mentioned, they have awarded the three teacher grants, one at each school for the fall semester. Those will be announced here shortly. And again, for the second or third year, they're doing grants by semester, so a chance for teachers to apply again for those in the spring. And you saw or had heard the work on board policy that we've done. So, Karen, great job again, lady.
Dr. Spring,
All right.
do you have any reports?
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Oh, okay, good. So from the park board, there will be a special holiday farmers market on Wednesday, November 23rd from 2 to 6 p.m. at the Wellness Center. The Riverside Skating Center will open Friday, November 25th, weather permitting. And there will be a grand opening for the Cumberland Dog Park on Thursday, December 8th at 11 a.m. So patrons will be able to enjoy a second dog park in our park system. Policy committee, with the policies approved tonight, and then the one new policy to be approved in December, we are finished with the fall Neola update. So yay us. Glass will have the second quarterly meeting tomorrow. Board teacher discussion did not meet in October, but the November meeting will be this Thursday.
Thank you, Dr. Spring.
Mhm.
Mrs. Austin.
From the Public Schools Foundation of Tippecanoe County, the Cupcake Run occurred and over 700 participants and volunteers raised nearly $17,000 to support grants to teachers at Lafayette, Tippecanoe, and our school districts. And they turned around and spent it real fast. Over $10,000 in grants have been awarded to 8 teachers. One of our teachers applied but was not selected. They had quite a few applications this year, which is super. The bake-off, the cupcake bake-off is being finalized now, and it will be in the neighborhood of Valentine's Day next year. They weren't sure if it was the 15th or the 16th of February. And in an interesting overlap of my committees, as a direct result of the discussion which happened at our inaugural community council meeting, parent Melissa Prochnow asked about the grant writing workshop that the foundation hosts for teachers, which is part of their continuing education credit, and whether or not that could be shared virtually. And not only did I find out that it's shared virtually or will be, but also in the past it fell at the end of the calendar year for continuing ed credit, and so most teachers didn't postpone their need to sign up for something until that last minute, and it's been moved to the end of July, so hopefully more teachers will be able to participate and get their credit and plan ahead for the rest of their credits year. So, thank you.
Besides the ISBA conference I attended, so which I will write, I already wrote the report. I will share, and I attended the community meeting, and which the city representatives from city, library, and foundation, and parent council attend, and people talk about a lot of ideas and share a lot of events but One thing we talked about is the possibility of having a master calendar in which people can add events there, and so whoever interested can check the calendar to see what's going on in the city, in the community. And but we don't have an action plan yet. And it sounds an interesting idea.
All right, thank you very much. Okay.
I would like to congratulate you and Deja and Lawrence on winning the election, and thank you for serving on the board. Look forward to working with everyone. And also I'd like to thank Alan and Karen for their years of service and all the contributions they made.
Agreed. All right, we will move on to communication from the audience. Non-agenda items, we do not have anyone signed up for that. Our next regular board meeting is Monday, December the 12th, here at 6:30 in the Happy Hollow LGI room. It is very interesting that we have Thanksgiving break, Wednesday the 23rd through Friday the 25th. I know everyone's looking forward to that. Just as general information, our board documents and audio from tonight's meeting will be posted on the website within 7 to 10 days following the board meeting. Of course, the live stream is available any old time anybody would like to listen to that. Mr. Hamilton, thank you for making Dr. Springer so wonderfully available tonight. We could hear her, we could see her. We hope that you very much enjoy your new grandson and that family time. Yes, I expect pictures. And with that note, can I get a motion to adjourn, please?
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Karpik. Second by Mr. Austin, Mrs. Austin, excuse me. Woo! All right, we have to vote on that. Mr. Karpik.
Aye.
Mr. Marley.
Aye.
Mr. Schott.
Aye.
Dr. Springer.
Aye.
Mrs. Austin.
Aye.
Dr. Yin.
Aye.
That motion carries. Thank you, everyone. Have a good evening. We do have things to sign.